roll. I mean, in actuality, I'm feeling rather poorly and this happens to be quite a good distraction. Oh, my camera's a little wonky. So I've decided to jump back on and carry on with the deck series. For anyone who is finding the other one perhaps a little long, I've gone back and I've added timestamps just as I do with my normal edited videos. So if you want to check out in the timestamps what decks I've been talking about, that way you can kind of decide if it's for you or not. So hopefully that helps with just the sheer length of the last one. It was actually 2 collections in one in the end, but nevertheless, we're here to talk about Fandom, Festive and Funny decks, which I'm far more prepped for today. So that's the good news. And you can see, just because I am talking about Fandom decks, I have my little Growlithe here with me, because there is a Pokemon deck. I'm actually going to start with Festive decks, and I use that term. Hello Holly, welcome. It's so good to have you here. I'm glad that you made it. For anyone that watches this live, by the way, whilst I try and make this have a lot of replayability, I do still check the comments. Please do ask questions, share thoughts on the decks, and I will get to them as and when I can. But I'll try and give it some smoothness. I'm slowly sinking into this. So yeah, festive decks. The reason that I chose the word festive is because it felt like the best way to kind of allude to holidays, Sabbats, that kind of thing. Again, some of these decks could have gone elsewhere. Before I jump into them, also I would add that this part of my collection is possibly the most, not obscure looking, but one of these decks is pretty much a collector's item only, which, as you know, I don't tend to do that. Well, I don't do it. It's just this one deck, and I would use it if it wasn't such a nightmare to use. It really hurts my hands. And the other ones in this deck, not this collection, not all of them, but some of them, whilst I really enjoy them, they could go out of my collection. You know, if I wanted to pare down for whatever reason, some of these decks might be on the chopping block. Not all of them, but some of them. So it's an interesting array of just randomness. But as we get towards the last few videos of my collection series, that's kind of what had to happen to make the have some sort of, like, what else do you put in the end? So starting with festive decks, we will jump into one that is actually in order. I have used it and I can't remember why I put it in order, but it's the Nightmare Before Christmas Tarot. I freaking adore the Nightmare Before Christmas movie. I really love it. The characters in it are so good, and whilst I'm not a massive fan of the whole array of Disney decks and just the thematic decks as a whole, I prefer if someone who's particularly passionate about them makes the one deck, whereas these are kind of, there's a whole mass market selection of them, right? So they didn't particularly interest me. However, I was pleasantly surprised with this one. My dad actually gifted it to me. He wanted to get me something tarot-ish, but didn't know, you know, what I had, what I didn't have. Saw this, I'm assuming, on Amazon. Knows I love the movie, and whilst it's not a deck that I feel like I need in my collection, not that I need any of them, but it is one that reads really well. And of all of the Disney decks that I saw, let's get into some of the pips. I thought that they were done a lot more thoughtfully than perhaps some of the others. I don't know if they're all done by the same creator, but I was really keen on the idea of the Labyrinth Tarot because that's one of my favourite movies in the whole entire world. And the pips just feel, in that deck, so painfully bland and, I don't know, unprovocative, like just nothing happens for me in them, whereas these, you can see some of them are still quite charismatic. I don't mind a pippish deck, it just has to be done a certain way, whereas I felt like the minors were kind of a secondary thought in some of the Disney and the other decks that are themed. So this one's actually works really well. The Queen of Candles is one of my favourite cards. The colours are beautiful. I just find it to be very charismatic. Don't get me wrong, if it gets to a point where perhaps I'm not sort of pulling for this anymore, it could be one that goes on the chopping block at some point. I do like to have, it's not so much a set number very, very specifically, but like a set kind of area number / what fits into my space and just my mental and emotional capacity, what I can reach for and rotate. That's all a part of it. So if it came to a point where I was valuing other decks, then this would possibly go, but for the time being it was a really thoughtful, fun, sweet present. I love that my dad wanted to get me something like this, and the artwork is very fun. It's very on brand for this, isn't it? Pretty 𝗫𝗄𝗃_𝗁 as well, even though the minors are maybe not the easiest for someone who is beginning, but the book is pretty 𝗫𝗄𝗃_𝗁, and it's quite a cute little book. So overall I was really pleased with this, and when I got it, it was for, I really feel like this was for my birthday, which means that it was just before autumn. So my birthday is towards the end of summer, and I remember watching the Nightmare Before Christmas again as it hit autumn and going through this deck. I feel like that's when I got it anyway. If it was a Christmas one, then I would have just watched it at Christmas, which begs the question, what do people think? Is The Nightmare Before Christmas a Halloween movie? Is it a Christmas movie, or is it both? Let me know. It was the pips that put you off too. I can completely understand that. Hello, 𝗲𝗄𝗃𝗍, welcome, welcome. Yeah, I do have a deck called the Cursed Auguries, which the pips are to many very bland, but there's something about what was chosen for each of them that feels really, I don't know, like it feels like it pulls on the story and the theme of that deck so well. It's definitely a personal choice from deck to deck for me because of that. But yeah, the whole Disney deck thing, I wasn't one of the people that was particularly excited about them, and I don't have too many themed kitschy decks in that way, unless you think about maybe the amount of skeletons, or I have some vampire decks, but I have lots of animal decks. But in this, I feel like animal decks are a different type of theme, in that it doesn't feel the same to me. Like people decks don't feel themed, therefore animal decks don't, but these kind of do. So this is the Halloween tarot, and I suppose I haven't read with The Nightmare Before Christmas enough to be able to say that it reads for me one way or another, but it's quite a cute reader. This is kitschy and cute looking, but is a freaking awesome reader. And considering I'm not one for, I suppose this isn't a 𝗫𝗄𝗃𝗁 clone, but it's super 𝗫𝗄𝗃𝗁. And I'm not too keen on amassing too many decks like that. As you can see, the cults especially have the original vibe to them. But I'm very much a Halloween kid. As well as enjoying Samhain, the Sabbath, I freaking love Halloween. It's not that traditional over here to love it that much. It's considered a little bit strange, but my family and I go big on it. Me and my dad live for Halloween. Like, he even dresses up to answer the door. He has some of the best Halloween decor, mainly because that's our aesthetic anyway. So some of the stuff are things that he has in his studio, and then he just gets them out on display. But I find this to be really punchy and a good all-round reader, I suppose. It doesn't feel like it's too themed or too kitschy to read on whatever the hell I fancy, and more importantly, as much as this is going to make people twitch, it's not one that I feel I can't read out of Halloween season. I definitely do. Oh, look at this. This is Wednesday Addams, right? I was gifted this deck a while back. It had been on my... God, it must have been a while back as well. Perhaps 4 years ago now, by a dear friend who knew it had been on my wish list for the longest time. Again, it was another... I tend to sit on things for a while, actually. For too long. And she sent me a little gift basket with this in it. And it's been a freaking treasure. The black cat that's in every card is so much fun. And for ages, I felt really twitchy about the deck because it says that the black cat's in every card. And there's a card that is really hard to see in. I'm not going to spoil it for everyone, but it is definitely in every card. I have found it. It was so exciting. That's how boring my life is. It was a fun day. But it is in there, and that's just another little treasure trove for me. I don't have the big guidebook, which, because I enjoy the deck so much, I love the idea of having a little bit more to read about the characters, like Frankenstein's monsters in there, and there's a scientist dude, maybe that's Frankenstein, I don't know, Frankenstein's bride. I'd really love to read the extra little bits about them, but I'm not going to... The book only comes in the pack, and I'm not going to buy myself another copy. Sticking with the theme of Halloween, therefore, in the kind of festive season, there is the Halloween Oracle, which is another one that I will read with out of season. I don't think that I would fare well with themed decks that felt like I couldn't do that with them. And whilst I do notice some of my decks feel very seasonal to me in my relationship with them, and I'll notice that I get them out more in, say, spring and summer, and then tend to not have them in rotation in the other months, it's more of a vibe and a natural thing I go to rather than feeling completely boxed in. And I had back when I agreed to do a couple of rock pool reviews, which I don't do anymore, they sent me the Yule version of their Sabbaths deck. And yeah, it wasn't something I was going to reach for. I assume maybe it's just because I'm such a Halloween queen. maybe that's why for me this is a lifetime aesthetic. But it's quite a fun deck. It's quite a light deck. The guidebook it's okay. It seems to have a little bit of, I don't want to say folklore, but I suppose that's the best way you can describe it. It has a little bit of that in it. The main complaint about this deck I hear quite a bit is that I find that I get that the Day of the Dead has a crossover in the time of the year. I didn't know how people would feel about that particular inclusion. No one's ever mentioned it that I've seen anyway. So I'd be curious to hear from those who that's actually a part of their heritage and culture. But overall, I freaking adore this deck. And yes, as I was saying, the main complaint is... Have I gone past them? Quite possibly. That this particular skull is pictured over several cards and people found it to be quite repetitive. As someone who loves the skull aesthetic, it's never bothered me whatsoever. But what I will say is I feel like there perhaps could have been more going on. I do like the idea of the light and dark contrasting and the underworld and then strength though. So it's all personal preference, and for me it hasn't been an issue. I would love more cards. That's the only thing. I tend not to buy those types of oracles anymore unless they've got a few more cards in them. 40 or 44, I can't remember which it is, actually feels really small to me nowadays. I get disappointed. I'm clearly greedy. Let's just call it what it is. Next, let's go on to fandom decks. I don't know how I feel about the first fandom deck that I'm going to show, but more because I've had some stuff with the creator. This was a birthday present from my partner, and this is a Harry Potter deck. Of course, all Harry Potter decks that are made aren't, what's the word, licensed? I don't know. Which isn't... There's lots of things that I don't even feel prepared to talk about, but in terms of not really feeling too worried about the creator because of some of the stuff that she's been involved in recent years, I'm not even going to go there. But this isn't created by her. She doesn't profit from this. I would imagine it's why it's swiftly come off of Etsy as well, like most fandom decks do. Most fandom decks cannot be found on anywhere like Etsy, certainly not Amazon. You know, they tend to be, someone will chuck them up there really quickly and then they go on their own website, or I know that for the other Harry Potter deck, people buy it from DeviantArt. Anyway, this one was local, and it's the first time that I've been able to find anything like this local, where I do still really have a big kind of a kinship and a joy for the movies and the book from childhood. Not the creator, but certainly what these movies, I don't want to say gave me, but you know, like what I took away from them. This is done really well. However, the more I look at it, the more I'm wondering if this is actual photography or artwork taken from somewhere and then with a filter over it, which I couldn't, and sort of mishmashed up. I couldn't really tell before. It's a really great reader. I was absolutely in love with it. It came with a damaged card. It was incredibly expensive, the deck at the time, and whilst it's the creator's prerogative, they were doing things like changing the retail, what they were saying the retail price of the deck was, and then putting sales on, but like upping the retail price to put a sale on to make it the price that it was before. Basically, I just watched them do some stuff that it's their prerogative, but I wasn't into it, and they've been telling me that they were going to send me a replacement for my damaged card, which thankfully isn't too damaged that I can't use it, but as this deck was one of the most expensive decks that I've bought and now is nowhere near the price, it felt like a replacement card would be great. They ignored me for 6 months and then told me they would send me a replacement and took my address and then went back to ignoring me and then emailed me again and then went back to ignoring me, and it's been over a year. I'm not expecting to get my card. It has left me with a few weird feelings about the deck, and I really don't want it to. So it's just, I freaking love this card for the Six of Swords. It feels like they knew Harry Potter really well, and the only bit that falls super flat for me are the majors, because they definitely wanted to put one of their, oh crap, I can't remember what the term is, but you know, the original heads of the houses. So, yep, no, the word's gone. They wanted to put one in per suit. And what you'll find is that one of them really sticks out and doesn't fit at all. And some of the other associations, which is difficult with fandom decks, they get really personal. Who I might think of for Queen of Pentacles is not necessarily who you're going to think of, but I feel like the fact that the Ravenclaw woman isn't in the sword suit just doesn't make sense to me at all, and then it all falls a little bit apart for me. Again, a bit of a strange choice for Page of Cups. Love her for Queen of Swords. And it's very, which is, again, not a thing against it. I don't mind. I have other decks like this. But it's very stuck to gender in this. And I think if they'd have come away from that, from the cults, and really let themselves go with it, then the representations for the cults might have fit a little bit. So it's a bit more of a push for some of them. I've, again, found it to be an awesome reader, but have difficulties with it since that happened, and really don't show this deck because I don't want to do any advertisement for the creator. I'm not going to lie. I try not to be shitty. I don't tend to badmouth people, but that's really the only person who's properly pushed it with me, and I'm not appreciative of it at all. I would rather have just been told, I'm not replacing your card, and we could have been done with it. But the continuous sort of roundabouts have really left a bad taste in my mouth for the deck. The next one, however, is awesome, and that is this I don't think you can get a hold of, so heads up. Who's a Pokemon fan? Yes, it was incredibly frustrating, Holly. Very much so. This is the Pokebox Tarot. I've had this for a long time. My dad got this for me for, as per my request, for a birthday 5 or 6 years ago. And it's awesome. It doesn't come with a guidebook, and of course, because I'm old enough that Pokemon came out when I was at the prime age for it, when I was at secondary school, I have been around since Pokemon birthed, at least in this country, because they were around in Japan before they came over here, as far as I understand it, which of course makes sense. So they came over here a little later. But one of the funny things is my brother loves Pokemon as well, and has a far better memory than I do. I used to have an amazing one. Fibromyalgia and other chronic pain and stuff has really ruined my memory. And living through from the first 150 to the sheer amount of Pokemon there are now means that I can't remember all of their names. I have no shame. That's just, it's the truth. He went through this deck with me, and I really need to find where I wrote it down. And he told me every single Pokemon. What a good sport. My brother has no interest in tarot whatsoever. He has no feelings about it, but he loves Pokemon. And one day, I think I was ill, I had a migraine or whatever, and yeah, we did that. So some of the inclusions are not what I would have picked, but I love the deck and how it's represented. It's very Rider-Waite-Smith, as you can see. I love this. And you've got the Pikachus with the two different towels, suggesting that one's a male Pikachu and one's a girl Pikachu. I would have loved it even more if perhaps they'd have done like 2 girl Pikachus or something a bit different. But again, this is an older deck, and it's quite cute how they've done it. I cannot hold this. The fact that I've held it for this long is amazing. I don't even know how to show you the size of this. I have every faith that someone out there would have no trouble using this deck, but I am not that person. I get hand pain from normal decks. This is your standard old school US games cardstock, very traditionally sized. This cardstock, by the way, is like there's the spare card. It's like a weird plastic, which is why it chips really easily, because of course it's got like a gold foil and some like lighter underlay. So even without use, it sort of chips in putting it in and out of the box, but it's still gorgeous. Right, look at, it's mammoth. It truly is mammoth. I don't never use it, but it's not, it's just, it's so heavy as well. This is really weighty stock. It's very long. It's a brick. It is, let's just call it what it is. It is huge, right? It's a brick. Oh, look at this though. Mewtwo for the Hermit. Yes, please. All day long. Look at it. It's stunning. I do wish it came with a guidebook, but... And also what I was going to say, sorry, is I think that some of the Pokemon choices are not perhaps what everyone would have selected, because the creator had previously made several Pokemon decks before this that were out of print and you couldn't get hold of. I don't think that they used to make a lot of them anyway. And I'd imagine as new Pokemon were coming out and obviously they were having fun with their style and changing the decks, they probably wanted to put different Pokemon in every single one. But yeah, I cannot shuffle this. It ends up being like a fan out and pick, which is not a problem. It's super slippery. It fans out really well. But it just is such a hefty one to pull out. And even if I never used it again, I would definitely keep it. It's the one thing that makes me a collector, in the sense of people who have stuff that they don't use. Because this, to me, Pokemon is just a big part of my interests. I still play all the games on Switch. I played them all on the various Game Boys and other things before that. And whilst I don't collect cards, I would not be averse to it, but I have finances to worry about, which is why, even though my collection is rather large, I don't actually buy that many decks, ironically. Most of these are gifts and reviews and stuff like that. So I don't collect Pokemon stuff too much, but I have a couple of little figures, and this is one of my favourite Pokemon in the world, Little Growlithe. This is one of the old school ones. So freaking adorable. I would love to get a Meowth because they're one of my other favourites, because of course my favourites come from the originals. Predominantly anyway. Oh, awesome, I've got my first bot. I don't know how to deal with this, so bear with me, people who are watching this back. Report for trying to tell me about nudie stuff. I don't know how to write that, just deletes the message. Awesome. Of course I don't have an admin, because, or a moderator or whatever it is, because I'm new to this. But yeah, if anyone was excited about the nudie messages, I've removed them, sorry. I love it. You have decks that you keep for the art but don't use. And you know, if people have lots of those decks, I think if that's what brings you joy and is in your realm of, I'm not saying you do, I'm just sort of verbing on what you said, that's totally cool for them. I'm not into the whole, this is how someone else should have their collection. But certainly it's quite out of the ordinary for me. Other than that, it doesn't see a lot of use, I'm not gonna lie. It's just huge. It hurts my hands. And that's where we've got to with it. We've got a couple more decks. Let's have a look. This one it's got in fact, my spammer would have really enjoyed this one. It's got boobies and penises and profanity in it, so heads up. It let you block them. That's good. At least you don't have to deal with them. That's what I was saying. If anyone ever sees a Meowth figurine, let me know. Unless it's ridiculously priced. Next, it's the inverted squirrel, so I've actually put it up the wrong way around. Next, we've got the Arcane Bullshit Oracle, and this has been in a few of my videos recently now, because this was in my VR to Candy, Soul and Soil for the 10 Curious Decks tag. I think it's something like that. My dad and I both kickstarted this deck as a joint present, so he has a copy, I have a copy, because we're both giant children and we thought it was hilarious. The whole kickstarting experience, which is not something I do often at all, I've kickstarted a whole of 2 decks in my lifetime, both of which the money was given to me again for a birthday or a Christmas present. But the whole experience of this from the creator Evan was amazing. It was the most hilarious thing through and through. This is totally his brand. If you're on Instagram, he's on there under Arcane Bullshit. It's hilarious. It makes no sense, and yet it makes all of the sense. And in making something that's a bit tongue-in-cheek about the occult and how we take it so seriously sometimes, which, as I say, I'm okay for serious as long as there's space for fun. I like to explore the spectrum. I don't want to get caught too much in doing things so strict one way or another that I box myself in, which crazy mystical shit, which is why this felt so fun for me. It's a really good reader. I like to use it with my Brady Tarot, and I get really serious messages from it, which is even more bizarre to me because I had not anticipated that. I knew I'd be able to read with it because I'm one of life's weirdos. I didn't think that I could get sensible messages from it. I will read it in a fun way as well, but just have a look at all of that artwork for a second. The lines are a little trippy sometimes. And look, who doesn't need a deck that's got a cat licking its own butt for eternity? But in the grand scheme of things, while this is hilarious to me, and often cats get caught in this cycle for a while, it also speaks to me of repetitive cycles and the... What was that saying about the definition of madness is just doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result? Bang, sensible message. I find it really versatile, but I think that, again, how anyone works with a deck has actually very little to do with the deck as long as it makes sense in what it was meant to be. Like if it's a tarot, does it have some form of a tarot system? If it was an oracle, is it, you know, mildly cohesive with what the creator's trying to do? And after that, it's down to the individual. That's genuinely my humble opinion. I don't think that everyone could read with this, but I can. The Pantsless Beekeeper, risky business. Risky business more so because for some reason this beekeeper feels the need to still have their visor and their headgear on, which suggests that the bees are a risk to this particular beekeeper. But they're pantsless, so... I mean, if I was a bee, I wouldn't be going for the scrotum either, I have to say, but who knows? This has turned into a strange live, but we knew it would because it's me and it's this deck. Horse Death. Today, this might take me a little longer. Like, this particular card, I'm just staring at. Nothing's happening. It has a very funny book. A very funny book, and it will help you if you get stuck with it, but I'm not suggesting anyone needs this deck. Oh my god, look, it's endless. It's eternity in cards. Trippy, trippy, trippy. I have a lot of fun with it, and yeah, that's the essence. It surprised me in a really pleasant way, and even though it's about 110 cards, I can just about shuffle it. It's pushing it. This and my Memento's actually got cards taken out of it because of how chunky she was getting. So I've got some that I call it putting them to rest or putting them to sleep. Like they're resting. I will probably change them and rotate them as and when I feel like it. Also, the Timing pack and the Ancestors pack are separate from it as well, because she is a chunky beast otherwise. But yeah, this is about as many tarot size, like traditional tarot size cards that I can shuffle in my tiny little hands. This deck is themed. It's not really a fandom. It's not, I suppose it's a bit festive. It's a bit fun, but not funny in the same capacity. it just didn't feel macabre enough for my macabre and skeleton decks, and that's why I've popped it in here. And it's the Adorabyssal Oracle, which was sent to me by a friend. I can't remember actually if it was this year or the end of last. And I didn't know if I would use it because it's not something that I would have bought myself. It being tiny does help. I don't know. It's just storage, isn't it? It does help. But I do a lot of folklore over on Patreon, and I just enjoy folklore in general. And it had the 𝗵𝘁𝗍 in it, which I had recently been writing tons about, and I was like, oh, hello. And then I realised that this deck is essentially, how does it say it? Because I'm probably gonna get it wrong. Yep, of course I can't find it. Because it's not just, it's like things from myth. It's got cryptids. Oh my, why does that word sound like I've not said it right? And it's got supernatural beings and it's got mythological beings. I think that that's the breakdown, but anyway. And it reminds me actually of an art style that I have a bit of a nostalgia around. Because I liked the whole Pokemon era and Pocket Monsters just in general, I wasn't so big on anything else that came out after because Pokemon had won by then. But I used to play a game online called Neopets, which is really aging me. But if anyone knows Neopets, then they can tell me. And the artwork reminds me of that. Also, how cool is this? It's got Bigfoot, it's got Nessie. Let's have a look, because I don't know all of these, which is one of the reasons even more so that I was enjoying reading the little snippets in the guidebook. And then because I'm a nerd, I'll go and look it up more on Google and whatever else I can get my hands on. Phoenix, mermaid, kitsune, just a cute ass little demon. I love it. I love the selection. Hydra. I mean, look, it's Odin's ravens. Ravens? Crows? Oh, my memory today, seriously. It's so well thought out. And I'd always been a little bit interested in this creator, whose name is escaping me, of course, like everything else today. But I'd never gotten any of their stuff. I don't buy decks from overseas anymore because it's just wildly expensive. But I've had a lot of fun with this. The keywords are very punchy, and yeah, I don't know what else to say. It just really surprised me because when I got it, I could totally see why she thought of me, but I didn't know if I would use it. I do tend to have a very particular aesthetic taste that I realised, even though I like games that look certain ways and artwork that looks a certain way, I don't necessarily enjoy all of that in my decks. And that's helped me weed decks out over the years. Like, this card is not my favourite, but overall this is cute demon personified and I love it. Look at the black shuck. I mean, is this not the cutest thing ever? Very, very, very cute. How are we making for time? Around 38 minutes. Okay, that's predominantly my Fandom, Festive and Funny decks. I have a deck that I will show very briefly, but the reason that I pondered about including this is because I don't know if I'm going to keep it or not. And that is the Exquisite Familiars, which is, to me, works really well as a game, as well as just an everyday Oracle deck. And I loved the idea of being able to blend the familiars and make your own. I asked for this when COVID was really in the thick of it, and I really wanted to support the creator, which I'm still glad I did, because I adore Richard. He's such a lovely human being, and his brain makes just the most interesting things. It really, this is just one of the most thoughtful, beautiful packages I have ever received. When it arrived, I was in a place where I just wasn't feeling like it at all. And I think that that just had a massive impact on my relationship with this deck. Also, and this is nowhere near commentary on the creator, this is just a packing issue. It came, and quite a few publishers do this as well. So it's not the individual artist. It's usually to do with the print house. But the plastic that had been wrapped around the cards was just on all of the cards too tight, and it's dinged cards, and cards have got damaged, you know. And I just, when it arrived, I was in a funk, and then that kind of added to the funk. And so I genuinely haven't used it. These are the originals. You can use them as singulars. Oh, look at this one. It gives me 𝗕𝗄𝗃 vibes. It does make me want to use it. I need to sort of deal with that. And then to give you a bit of an idea, you can heads or tail them. There's even a coin to help you choose with the heads or tails, which is fabulous. And it reminds me of those childhood books, as I say, with the mix and match. Everything about this means that I should be using it and loving it. It was bought not to be a serious thing, but to be a fun thing. And it has sat under this altar for a very long time, being like, I suppose, my one shame, because I don't do stuff like that. I never buy stuff that I am not almost certain that I'll use and love. I definitely don't just leave things sitting there being, you know, being forgotten about. I think it's a real shame when they put those bands on too tight as well. Like, I'm just, I was already so irritated at the time. I was sick of COVID like everyone else was. You know, sick of being ill on top of it, and it just was a weird, unfortunate time for it to pop up. It is so unique, and I feel like I should have backed his other Oracle deck before, but I didn't have the capacity and the money, and you know, if I don't have it, I don't get it. It's as simple as that. But he had one called the Lucky Potion Oracle that came with like a mat and a die, because the die told you one of 3 sides that the message was for. And I think that I would really have enjoyed that as well. But I was really excited about the Exquisite Familiars, and maybe I just need to kick my own butt and give it a try. So I haven't committed to selling it. That does bring me on to another point though. There's a few decks that I didn't include in my deck collection series because I already knew they were going. It's just chronically difficult to sell stuff in the UK. I don't know about anyone else. eBay fees are so high. I try and sell in groups on Facebook. No one wants to buy decks over here. And even the out of print ones, I've been trying to price them really accessible. I don't know. Like, my friends say to me, they put their decks up in other countries and they're gone within like the week. I don't know what it is about England. I know there's a lot less people over here than, say, the pool that America have got to buy, but yeah, I have a stack of decks I've been trying to freaking get rid of for ages, and it's like they dribble out, which is frustrating because I could do with the money. But I have added 3 decks to that I included in these videos, and I thought that people might find that interesting to hear what they were and my reasons. I possibly even said that I wouldn't get rid of one of them, but I changed my mind, which is totally fine. I am getting rid of my Deviant Moon. I wanted to work with it more and I just kept coming up against the same thing. It doesn't feel nice in my hands. not in a just my hands hurt kind of way, like the deck is not the right size and shape for me. And as strange as that may sound, I've got so many decks that I don't need to keep onto a deck because of that. I freaking adore the aesthetic. I think that 𝗵𝘁𝗄𝗃𝗄𝗃 creates masterpieces, definitely in the prime of his artwork. It's so clever, the way that the textures are layered into the artwork. For all intents and purposes, it should be one of my perfect decks, but that's not how humans work. And I've put it up for sale. I much prefer his indie cardstock, which I have felt, although I don't own one of his indie decks, and I can't just keep keeping the Deviant Moon because I can't get his other decks. So it's going. The Considerate Cat Tarot is going because it's such a beautiful, thoughtful deck. I love what she did. I love the cats that are represented. I love the rescue and fostering system that's represented in it as well. I don't use it. I can't keep keeping something that I don't use. Many people will know. I don't mind not using decks for a while because, you know, I've got possibly about 70 to 80 in total. All of my decks, Tarot, Oracle, playing cards. That's around my number if anyone's curious, I think. But yeah, I can't. It's time for it to go to someone who's genuinely going to use it. I have other cat decks that get used over and over and over again, and that doesn't. And then finally, I kept my prototype Pacific Northwest and don't have the, what's the word? The finished version of it anymore. You just got rid of a load through We Buy Books. They pay pittance. Oh, really? I mean, see, these are... I do tend to take some stuff to charity, or over the years I've sent friends like packages with just loads of decks that I think they'll show an interest in one deck and I just add a bunch of other stuff in. Because that's fun, right? It's so nice to be able to gift things to other people. But I recently gifted a bunch of decks, and now I'm sort of at the point where, you know, you think it would be really helpful for my life situation if I could sell some of these, but it may very well get to that stage. And yes, it's very hard to sell mass market over here. People seem to prefer to get things new, which is fine. Not very eco-friendly, but totally fine. No judgment. It depends on what state the deck is for me. Like, I'm not going to buy something falling apart, but I don't mind secondhand decks. That said, obviously I've been gifted a bunch, so I'm very spoiled. So yeah, some have actually passed on even since these videos, and then 2 have entered my collection, which we will wrap up and look at those really quickly because they can't go where I would have put them because I've done those videos already. You made about 70, including a few books. I mean, I really appreciate you telling me, Holly, because I will bear that in mind. I've been avoiding eBay because eBay have absolutely obliterated me on charges recently. And I have healthcare bills and just other stuff that I would love to put some money towards and not give it all to eBay, but we shall see. That's very handy to know, and I will make a note of that. Thank you. The 2 decks that came into my collection were very, very, very thoughtfully contemplated, definitely not frivolous at all. One of them has been on and off of my wish list. I actually owned a copy of it, but without the guidebook. We didn't jam at the time. I got rid of it. It was a bad idea. Bum, bum, bum. This year I got it back. I have a second-hand copy. And it is more worn than I had anticipated, but not a big deal. The creator was the creator. The seller was very good about it. They edged it. I don't edge decks. I have 1 deck that I ever edged myself. Technically I did 2. One went very badly, and that was when I realised it's just not my jam. But how yummy does that look? And this is a treat. It is so cool. I understand why people rave about the book. It is, for me, nostalgic. Is it 80s or 90s? It's over the top, right? It's like a romance novel, but with vampires. And that's why I was so happy for the longest time with my Vampire Tarot by Robert M. Place, because that to me is more well-rounded. But I like this. Why was I trying to kid myself otherwise? It's not something that I like a lot, but it does have a kind of very, how do I say it? Like heterosexual male gaze kind of vibe to it, which I'm not a fan of in decks, just because I feel like it's been done in media and just life in general for years. But I freaking love this deck, and everything that I usually wouldn't like about it gets ignored in this, basically. It's my I'm gonna be that witch vampire lover deck. It's so fun, it's so thoughtful, the book is really interesting. I enjoy his discussion of concepts around young and stuff like that because of what I do for a living. But there's a few parts where I'm like, okay, that's not how I would have said it, or whatever it is. But overall, it's such a freaking thoughtful deck, and I don't think I can add anything to a discussion about it that other people haven't articulated in a far better fashion. I think it's just whether you like the artwork or not, because the content in the book, even if you're not into all of it, is definitely worth it. I love the cards. It's just a mood. I used to draw characters like this as well. Really into, like, this is what I wanted to look like. I'm far less feminine, actually. But in terms of like the pale skin and the gothic-y, grungy, that's my mood. It is. I maybe look less like that nowadays, but just because, again, unfortunately, my chronic illness just is ruined quite a bit. But it's a mood that I'm here for, and it's given me some very thoughtful, very emotional readings, because things happen with this deck that I've noticed. I pulled, I think it's a star card, and it had a red candle in it when I was doing a red candle spellcraft ritual, and I pulled the card and it almost mimics what I had on my altar. I've had some stuff up where I've chosen to read the book because I'm still in a space where I'm getting to know this. I've had it 5 months. I'm really bad with time. I got it this year, maybe 4 months. And I'll read the book and it says something that I'm literally in the midst of going through, thinking about, looking into, exploring. It's been such a delight, and because I'm not only pretty much in savings mode, but also not really looking to add to what I've got at the moment, I'm pretty peaceful with what I've got. Of course, there's a couple of things on my wish list, but it's not a big wish list at all. So for that to have paid off so well, yes, I'm very happy about that. And finally, before we go, a newbie. Let me just check the comments. Oh, my spammer's back. I really, I don't want cheap sex, thanks. Amazing. I probably need to get a moderator if I carry on doing these, but I'm just not that popular on YouTube nowadays. Let's face it. I live in Instagram world. It's taken me years to sort of come back and try and get into the swing of this, which is why I'm doing it now. But we'll see how it goes. We'll see if people actually enjoy the lives, because it's really hard for me to keep doing videos that I then edit, which I've said before. Sorry people, I'm just trying to deal with this person who I just don't know how to block. Maybe someone can tell me how to do that at a later date. Anywho, I don't want to give them any more time. You saved some back to put on eBay. I mean, eBay is not the worst, but they have upped their fee that they take, and it felt, for the small price that I was selling things at, it felt like quite a big loss once you consider their percentage includes the postage, which obviously you're not getting the postage. That comes out of what you get anyway because you're paying for it. That's why we put it on there. So yeah, it's weird. The artwork reminds you of 80s, 90s fantasy art. Yes, it has that, doesn't it? It has that vibe, and I thoroughly enjoy that. Now, this deck is, you know, it's been talked about. Everyone else has beat me to the punch. But I did pre-order this. It was so affordable. And even when I'm being really harsh with my money, a £10 deck once every 6 months or a year that's not on, like, you know, not on a birthday or an occasion, that's okay. That's okay for me. This has been a treat, the Woodland Wardens. I, like many people, have been using it with my 𝗬𝗂𝗁𝗃𝗁. I definitely didn't start that party, but I did jump in on it. But it goes with everything. The reason that I particularly love this deck and why it's hit home with me so well, aside from my sheer love of animal decks, as you will have seen from my animal deck collection video, which is a big one, I love the inclusion of folklore. It's a lot more concise and brief than I'd hoped for if I were to critique it. Again, I don't write books, you know, and there's only so much space per card. I had hoped for a little more just because I've seen some of the creators' other writing. However, I do still really appreciate most of what's in the book. It's still enjoyable for me. It's just when it said about all of the folklore and stuff on the back, I was really hoping for a little bit more, that's all. The fox and the ivy was really a clincher for me because I love the keyword for fox being adaptability. I work with fox a lot. I understand why cunning and sometimes even trickster, which interestingly enough actually sort of travels over from coyote, which then it gets meshed up and confused. But anyway, I know enough of the folklore and the history and just farming experience of foxes to understand why those keywords come up. But with animal decks, I'm bored of keep seeing the same thing. I've got decks that do that. I'm good with that. I want something different. Otherwise, it doesn't really make my collection. I enjoyed the mix between the plant and the animal, although I'm not as familiar with plant medicine and workings or folklore at all. However, I am familiar with a lot of these plants, which was a pleasant surprise. And again, the book explains nicely so that you understand why each was chosen and how they bring together this message. I love that this has got a marten in it. I freaking love them. I love foxgloves. This is a mood for me. More than that, this is one of my favourite art styles. Now, I don't know if this quite counts as natural history. You know, like that fine art style that used to be in a lot of encyclopedias and field guides and those type of books before photography became a thing in those books. When people did natural history artwork, that's what this reminds me of. I don't know if that's definitely the art style, but I feel like it is, or it's close enough. That's one of my favourites. I'm always looking for, I say vintage, just old, you know, no longer in production books, animal books and insect field guides and stuff with that type of artwork in. That's something that I would happily have a small collection of because I still use them. I only have probably about 2 of those because I, again, won't pay out of print prices. I'll just wait and wait. And if I happen to stumble upon one in a thrift shop or from someone who's just selling them off cheap, then I will consider grabbing it if I can afford to do so. It's so gorgeous. It really was funny because I very rarely get decks when they come out, and I see hype trains occur, and I'm always really curious about whether I would be a part of the hype train or not, and for this I am. The card stock is interesting. I'm not about to slate it at all. It feels like it's gonna do a really good job. It's a little chippy around the edges. It was so cheap, it really doesn't surprise me, and it doesn't feel too cheap, you know. It's doing a lot better job than a few of the big publishers out there. So overall, I have been in love with this. And what's interesting is, so for the Coyote and Datura, we've got Deceit. They're really respectful discussions of why the keywords are linked to the animal as well. And I appreciate that also. Nice selection of keywords, very balanced deck. I'm an animal woman. I don't want all of the animal decks because some of them disappoint me, but I will happily have a few more animal decks than I quote unquote need, because I don't need any. But I have more than I would need to use because I'm freaking here for it with the animals. You were so tempted by the Woodland Wardens, but you were strong. How's that strength feeling at the moment, Holly? And the art absolutely has that feel about it, doesn't it? It really does. And again, in one of my previous lives about the curio decks, I think I showed one of the books that I am referencing as well. It's been out on my altar space. Like, literally, if I lean over, I'm hopefully not wobbling the camera too often. Here's my 𝗚𝗚𝗃𝗃. They're just so yummy together. I will show you really quickly, and we have just hit an hour, so then we are going to wrap up. Hey B, I'm really sorry you've come at the end, and they aren't mostly animal decks. No, my animal deck collection video is already up. These were fandom decks, so Pokemon, Harry Potter, funny decks, the Arcane bullshit, and then festive decks, some Halloweeny stuff, also a little Adorabyssal, and these are just the 2 decks. The Vampire Tarot and the Wardens are the 2 decks that I got after I started doing these videos that have been, I got them after I'd already recorded their category, so that's why I'm showing them. And then I'm just showing these 2 together. Oh, look, how timely. There it is. Look, they're so cute. Now, I will use, and I said this yesterday on my other live, I'll use decks that don't aesthetically match because I feel like it. But it's always fun when they do, either aesthetically or maybe the themes match. It really depends on how I'm feeling and what I'm wanting to use, because what I want to use will win out all the time. Like, I use these 2 together as well, and they're a very, very different mood. Because Oracle and Oracle is also fab, fab, fab. But yes. So that's what I've brought in since I started my collection, which I don't feel bad about at all. They have been big hits. Very, very happy with them. You're not sure of the minors on this deck. Oh, you mean the 𝗚𝗃𝗃𝗃? I speak properly about the 𝗚𝗃𝗃𝗃 in my animal tarot deck collection video, but the minors are, a few people have mentioned them because the cups are still very pentacly coloured, And also there's not that much water in the cups, and the cups are made from acorn hats. I've got one which do look like cups. And I can totally see why they were used, but I think for people who find it easier when the animal's like associated to the element a bit more, it throws them. So I can understand that. I've heard that. They do look good together, don't they? 𝗷𝗄𝗄𝗃 approves. So that's it. If people are curious, I'm very tempted to jump on and do another live, perhaps even in the coming days. I nearly just said, I'll just come on again and do the next one, but I should probably have a break. But I want to get done my Lenormand playing card and affirmation decks, which are a small, very randomised, again, selection. I quite like playing card decks. I'll either use them as field guides because that's the kind I've got, or I'd play solitaire with them because I'm old. I'm not really old, but I'm an old soul maybe. I only have 2 Lenormand decks, both from the same person. He created one and bought me the other one. I am terrible at reading Lenormand, don't understand it, use them as oracle decks because I can. And then affirmation decks, as you can imagine, not a big part of my deck collection, but no shades to them, they can be very powerful, and I have three of them. One's a little bit affirmative, but it has some other stuff going on. So yeah, not a big collection. I have my people decks, which I've already recorded but have yet to edit, and if I feel very lazy, I might just do a live on that as well. Then I'm done. I am officially done. So yeah. Queen of Candles is the Queen of Wands. Queen of Candles? Have you gone back to the beginning, B? Because that sounds like you're talking about a different deck. It sounds like you're talking about the Nightmare Before Christmas, which in that case, yes, the wands are. But I'm going to end this now anyway, because we've just hit, like I said, over an hour, and hopefully that will make it replayable. Thank you for hanging out with me in the comments, those of you who did. It's nice to have company. And yeah, I will be back at some point pretty soon, probably, to get the rest of those videos finished up. Take care until then, and I will see you very soon. Bye.